So I'm here with Chris O'Connell, president of the Melody Place organization, and Mark Goudie, president and CEO of OSEG and Lansdowne Live. And we just spent a couple minutes introducing ourselves. So Mark, what is new in 2024 at OSEG and Lansdowne Live?
Well, the biggest thing, Bruce, we got going on right now is Lansdowne 2.0, right? The innovation. So, mixed emotions, but tearing down the old Civic Center complex and kind of replacing it with a standalone event center. A little smaller than the current configuration, but 6,000, 6,500. In a new north side grandstand that doesn't have an arena below it that leaks. And replacing some of the retail that we have here that's affixed to the current Civic Center. And then there'll be two towers up to 40 stories each, but 1,200 units, something like that, kind of when we get done in 3 phases, so that we can get the event center built first and move all of our arena business into the new event center, which lets us take. So Chris, you're familiar with right? So the quirkiness of here, which allows us then to, after we got the event center rolling, to take down the Civic Center complex, which is north side stands, arena, and the adjacent retail. Phase 2 would be build the north side stands, some parking with a retail podium on top of it. So that's phase 2. Get that done, get the Red Blacks back playing in a full stadium, the retail back open up, and then phase 3 would be the residential that happens above the podium. So 2 years event center, 2 years for north side stands and retail, and then around 3 to 5 years, I guess, whatever the developer figures out for phase 3 and the new residential.
And I think if I recall correctly, Mark, Lansdowne Live is 42 acres in total, something like that.
Yeah, it's about 40 acres.
40 acres, yeah.
Partnership with the city, so we run all of the sports facilities and the mixed-use retail stuff, and the city runs the 2 heritage buildings, the Aberdeen Pavilion, the horticulture building, and the park kind of in behind us here.
Did I ever tell you, Mark, that when the city of Ottawa proposed tearing down the cattle castle, the Aberdeen Pavilion, I called up then Mayor of Ottawa, Jackie Holtzman, and I said to Jackie, if you're going to tear it down, don't do that. I'll come onto the site with my team and we'll take it down piece by piece. And she said, what would you do with it? I said, I'm going to reassemble it next to the Canadian Tire Center, which was called the Palladium back then.
Yeah.
And she said, really, you do that? I said, it's such a fantastic building. It would be a shame. Chris, it was built in the 1890s and it's just built like a mechano set. So you could literally go in there. Like if you remember, Chris, you may be too young to remember what a mechano set is, but you could go in there and literally unbolt it and then bolt it back together again. Mark, I don't know if you know this, but I've moved quite a number of buildings. So if you can imagine in your mind, Mark, the Canadian Tire Center with a beautiful Aberdeen Pavilion next to it would be quite a combination.
It is, but it's an old, you know this, Bruce, it's an old shed, right?
Yeah,
it's like a glorified shed. So if, again, if I was king of the world for a day, you'd build something in it, like leave the structure the way it is right now. And you'd build something inside it, maybe utilizing glass so you can kind of see some of the structure.
Yeah.
You could have stuff going on kind of 4 months of the year, but I got enough battles with the city just getting stuff.
I get that. But anyway, to finish off the story, Jackie asked me, would you send me a letter saying that you'll take it down and reassemble it and you'll preserve the heritage? And I said, absolutely. So I sent her, I sent her a note, and it was going to, back then, it was going to cost $350,000 to tear it down.
No way.
Yeah, I was going to save the city $350,000 and get myself a 40,000 square foot column-free building. Shed. Anyway, so she got the letter and she goes to council to reconsider the decision to tear it down and to basically let us come, the Sens, come and disassemble it. And as soon as she showed the letter to some of the councilors, they said, "Oh, that son of a bitch Firestone is stealing our building." know. And so they reversed their first decision to tear it down, and then they spent the $5.5 million to fix it up.
Right.
And so I definitely am the savior of the Aberdeen Pavilion in Ottawa.
I'll tell Jim Watson, who thinks he's the savior of it, he's not right.
Well, you know, you can always talk to Jackie. You know, she's still going strong. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know this, but she's full of beans, and you can ask her, and she'll tell you, "Oh yeah, we demonize Firestone." Anyway, thanks very much for your time today. So
Yeah,
what
my pleasure.
I'd like to do is I'd like to share a few slides with you, if that's okay, Mark,
Yeah, please.
that Chris and I have put together just to explain the concept, because it does need a little explaining. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. All right. So hang on. I'll share my screen. Let's see. Excuse me. I apologize. Um, the name of the company is the Melody Place Organization, and you can't Google it because we're still under the water table. All right.
Yep.
So you may or may not know this, Mark, but I do a fair amount of coaching, you know, real estate investment and business coaching in the States and Canada. And the older I get, the less doing I do and the more talking. You know, that's kind of my role in this as the coach. And as I said earlier, Chris O'Connell here with us is the president of the Melody Place organization. And the concept is pretty simple, actually. It's a little bit more complicated to implement, obviously, but it's about bringing Cirque du Soleil style tents to venues, you know, in North America, maybe overseas, with some tiny home accommodation. And if you see the tagline on my screen, Tailgate Village, my wife came up with that.
Cool.
And so if you don't like it, don't say anything.
I
All
love
right.
it.
So the idea is to have a combination on about a half an acre site at next to venues, event venues, arenas, and
Yeah.
stadiums in Canada, the United States, where people could, you know, basically, you know, tailgate, but also stay overnight. So, for example, if you had I don't know, a Taylor Swift concert in the
Yeah.
park, you know, people could obviously book in probably around 3 in the afternoon, maybe have a glass of wine or two, play some games, have some fun, and then go see the concert and then stay overnight. And then probably book out to the next day at 11.
Yeah.
And we've connected with actually an Ottawa-based company called Humble Creek Homes. They're producing these fantastic tiny homes, which really aren't that tiny. They have 470 square feet of living space in what is probably one of the best tiny homes manufactured anywhere. And I coach, I think now 4 or 5 tiny home manufacturers, 2 in the United States and 3 in Canada. And these guys are probably producing the best version of it. And this one can sleep, I think, up to 7, but really, realistically, 5
Right. Right.
comfortably. And then here is the layout. If OSEG likes the idea and there's a deal to be made between the two groups, then probably the one on the left side of this screen would make the most sense for Lansdowne Live. It requires less land, about a half an acre. You can see on the screen there. And basically, we're parking 12 tiny homes. And what's interesting about this, and this is subject to an industrial design patent, what's interesting about this, Mark, is that these tiny homes are partly in the building, in the tent, if you can sort of see the gray circle around.
Yep. Yep.
So they're partly inside the tent and partly outside the tent. And the inner part of the tent, I'll just use my cursor to point out this middle portion is kind of a play area. So these are not this accommodation would not be rented to individuals. It's only for groups. So let's say, for example, I was running a large development company and I wanted to bring 60 of my best customers, you know, or my most important suppliers or contractors, trades, whatever. I could book the Melody Place overnight, come to Lansdowne Park, Lansdowne Live, enjoy whatever there is to be enjoyed there, and then crash overnight with my group. The one on the right hand side is much bigger.
Yeah.
And probably it is too big maybe for OSEG, but the one on the left probably would work. Just give you a sense of what it looks like inside. I mean, these are really fabulous. And they're really at the top end of design and finishing and accommodation. And like I said, each unit can sleep 5. And we've run a number of models. And it's not the biggest revenue generator for OSEG or any landlord, but this configuration with the 12 tiny homes, 12 nobles, and the smaller 10 probably will generate a little over $500,000 a year for the landlord. Something like that. And then there's four main categories: food and beverage, ticket sales, sponsorship and signage revenues, and land lease payments. And if we ever get a chance to go, past an introduction, we'll share the model with you, and you can have a look at it and your people as well. And so it isn't the biggest revenue stream, but I think it might be quite important, in part because, I mean, you're in the entertainment business. I've done quite a bit of that work as well. I've helped a little bit with the Disney company back in the day. Any number of small and large entertainment firms, and of course, I had a little bit of a say in founding the Ottawa Senators and what have you. So I know the business quite well. And I asked you when we started this conversation, what's new this year at Lansdowne Live and what's coming up. It's very exciting, but I think having new stuff is important in the entertainment industry, and this would be quite, I think, unique.
Yeah.
I only have a couple.
I'll tell you, I love it, and it's something that I had been trying to figure out how to do over the last couple of years.
Oh, wow.
What we were kind of looking at was ice hotel kind of thing, right? Like how we could kind of build something like this, but with an ice hotel as the kind of instead of the tent.
Yeah. So just to comment on that, I love the Ice Hotel. There's a film made by, I think, Hallmark Channel, which I watched with three of my daughters, where it's cold inside, and it's about the Ice Hotel in Quebec. It's a beautiful little movie. It's perfect for young women and their father. But for the Melody Place, obviously in a place like Miami where Chris is based, it needs a hell of a lot of cooling. But in a place like Ottawa, it needs heat. So this would run 24. It would run 365 days a year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So a lot more heat in Ottawa, and some cooling, of course, but a lot of cooling in Miami, and a little bit of heat there.
Mark, I just had a quick question around that. Just coming to that idea, was that feedback you heard from whether it be season ticket holders?
No, it's kind of picking up on what Bruce said, right? Like what we are kind of be everything, right? In Ottawa, and we do about 4 million visitors a year. But we're not, tier 1 sports. We're tier 2 sports. Like we're the 67s, not the Senators. We're the Red Blacks, not the NFL. Right, we're Lansdowne, we're not the Byward Market, so we're kind of got to be doing cool stuff a lot of the time, and capturing people's imagination and have people kind of attention span pointed to us. So we do some things that we try not to lose money, but we do some things that don't make us any money, but they kind of keep us a bit of a cool factor. Christmas market is one of those things, right? We make no money on the Christmas market, but it's a focal point where we're the focal point in Ottawa for 3-4 weeks or so. So
exactly,
it's kind of down that vein. That
cool.
We just do weird, cool stuff that
I love it.
Innovative place.
Right. Yeah, and this would be the number on the screen would be net to you guys. So this will hopefully make money for Melody Place organization and make some money for Lansdowne Live. But I think you wrote the next slide, Mark.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Not bad for an accountant, eh? Yeah, Bruce?
Not bad at all. So Chris and I in our group, we've talked a lot about this, because we're going to pitch this to, some of the big arena stadiums in the United States and some in Canada, and maybe a few overseas in the United Kingdom and Germany and Australia. Those are the big sporting nations, who put real money into this business. Yeah. And so $500,000 a year, like I said, to a landlord or on a land lease, is not the be all and end all for Lansdowne Live, or for that matter, the Formula One arena in Miami. But it's the groups that would use it that would have significant influence. People come from all over the world to go to Miami to go to the F1, and people know Ottawa, we're a G7 capital, And so the influencer thing is incredibly important. And I mean, I'm just picking up on what you said. I mean, I loved what you said, and I'm glad you asked that question, Chris, because almost 80% of US-based companies with 100 employees or more are using influencer marketing. And it's the people who will stay there, the people who come to an F1 race, or the people who will come to see, you know, a Taylor Swift or whoever you can get at Lansdowne. You know, these are really, really important groups. And the other thing is you know, even if there's no event or significant major event going on, Chris, just before you jumped on the call, Mark was telling me that he's an officiant at a wedding coming up soon, I guess in Miami probably, right, Chris?
Actually, Brazil, if you can believe it. So there's gonna be a
All right, well,
Portuguese
even
element to
more
it.
exciting. Okay, Brazil.
Yeah.
And so, you know, even when the arena or the stadium is dark, there would be events at the Melody Place.
Right. Yeah, cool. And we have I say like 4 million visitors, but we have this year we'll do 183 events, right?
Yeah,
So
it's
that's one
fantastic.
every couple days.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I know that. I mean, you're going to compete with Madison Square Garden at some point. I mean, they do well over 200. Um, but you know, the idea of this, the idea of the Melody Place is not just that it has overnight accommodation, but it actually has some very playful elements inside. You know, I mean, just all kinds of really fun things to do, to occupy. So if you're, like I said, if you're doing a client appreciation night and your clients come there, they're not just sitting around and drinking. They're actually, I don't know, playing bocce, or they're listening to music, live music or something inside the Melody Place.
Right.
So that, I think that's really important. And like I said, I did a little bit of work for Mike Eisner when he was the president and CEO of Disney, and it's all about bringing back the magic. I don't have to tell you that it's not necessarily on the entertainment industry. It's not necessarily, you know, the assets you own. I mean, if you run an NHL team, 50% of the value of the team, I don't have to tell you this, you know this, Mark, is in the value of your player contracts. You know, so it's not about, you know, it's not just about the assets that Disney owns. It's about the magic that they create, and we think this will contribute to that, you know, in a very nice way. And this is the last slide, I think. And these are just some of the use cases that Chris and his group have put together. You can read them on the screen. And tailgating is the one my wife put together or focused on. But everything else, you know, weddings, corporate meetings, pop-up shops, workshops, classes. I mean, I could do a coaching session in there, Chris.
Yeah, you could. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then here's I got a nice picture of Chris and put it in the slide deck this morning. So just if you want to follow up, I'll put this in the what do you call it, the chat box for you, Mark, so you
Awesome.
have his contact information.
Thank you.
So that's basically the presentation. But, you know, I think obviously in Ottawa, there are 3 possible locations, I think, and probably more than 3, but at least 3. OSEG would be, at least in my mind, top of the list. And then LeBreton Flats is another possibility. And of course, the Canadian Tire Center is a possibility. But the Canadian Tire Center, we don't know what the future is of that. You know, there's a new owner there, and obviously he has his own you know, views as to what's going to happen. And I don't have to tell you what it's like to work with the NCC.
Yeah. Well, a little less hard, I guess, or a little more hard than the working with the city sometimes, right? And that's my question on that would be just where would it go, right?
Yeah.
Because it would have to go on city property, which is a challenge, as we're finding out kind of as we try to build our next incarnation here.
Good point.
Yeah.
You know, what do they typically push back just to that point? I mean, it's probably a million things, but what typically tends to be the trigger for them to say, whoa, 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 let's
Yeah,
move up here.
it's really, we're in a very activist neighborhood here in the Glebe.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So
That's fair.
you know, they'd rather do nothing, like just leave,
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
roll it back 20 years or roll it back 50 years and we'd be happier with that. So they'll
Right.
worry about, you know, the lack of green space, the lack of, you know, neighborhood, the commercialization of, the privatization of, it's all that kind of stuff,
Got it.
right?
Yeah.
And our city right now, unfortunately, is you got a lot of the experienced people are retiring, so it's going through a transition, and there's really no leadership at the city, unfortunately. I mean, I think Mark Sutcliffe's doing a good job, but he's really, in terms of the bureaucracy and the city staff, they're challenged right now. So yeah, happy to think it through because, we're trying to figure out, what this looks like when it kind of all starts popping out in 3 to 5 years. And I love the concept of it. I love the concept of having transitional space and temporary space and having people, live, work, play down here. And on a temporary basis, I could see people like you said, Bruce, coming to a Red Blacks game and, making the weekend of it, staying here,
Yeah,
coming back in the winter time for the Christmas market
yeah,
and
that'd
being
be
able
really
to
cool.
eat at a restaurant over here or go to the
Yeah,
Christmas market over here,
yeah,
and then take a show in at the arena over here, and it could be really cool kind of places. When I go
that's
away with
nice.
my wife to places, I look for different things, right? I've stayed in enough
Yeah,
Marriotts in my life. So I want to stay on an Airbnb that's like on a boat, in
yeah.
Providence, out in the harbor or something like that, or a tent somewhere kind of in Utah. So it's right down that alley, which I get. And people are looking for experiences, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. I mean, I think one of the number one attractions on Airbnb was put together by a lady who's in her 40s and her mother who's in her 70s. They bought an old forest ranger tower that was being decommissioned. They put an Airbnb cabin on top of the tower.
Right,
I don't know how far that is. It's
right.
probably 200 feet tall.
How cool is that?
How cool is that? And then she did another one in Idaho called the Big Potato.
Yeah,
And there's a 3-ton concrete potato, and you can go, Idaho's famous for potatoes. So I think you're right. People are looking for experiences, and I think this would be cool. In terms of location, Mark, do you have any parking spaces that OSEG controls?
Um, well, we control the whole parking garage here, but that's not where you want to be putting something like this. There's really no on-site parking, right? It's just side of the street, kind of by if you were doing this, you'd figure out how to put it out on the Great Lawn, or at least
Yeah,
butting
probably you're
Great
right. But just to give you a scale, it's probably the equivalent of about 80 parking spaces.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if you were to put something like this at Canadian Tire Center, they've got about 7,000 parking spaces. You'd take up about 1.2% of those spaces
right.
for something
Yeah,
like this. It's
we
it's
could probably,
relatively small. That's why, yeah, I thought the smaller scale model might be better for OSEG than
yeah,
but we
yeah,
wouldn't do it unless we had your support. If it's not something that you're interested in, we would rather the money goes to either OSEG or OSEG's charity, or if you have a
yeah.
foundation, I'm sure you have a foundation.
Chris, what's the cost to kind of set up and tear down?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I guess for the smaller one, Bruce, trying to think the exact estimates there. Where do you think that would come in?
Well, we know that the 12 each of the tiny homes is about $200,000, Mark.
Right.
So you've got, I think I know where you're going, Mark. You're looking at, for Melody Place for Chris and the group, they probably need a minimum of 3-year lease.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this isn't a kind of set it up for the
Yeah.
Miami
So,
F1 for 3 weeks and tear it back down and move
no,
it
no,
some.
I don't think so. I think it would be,
Right.
it'd be a permanent installation. And like I said, I mean,
Yeah.
weddings happen all the time, right? So it's not just for, a 10-day or 15-day event. It's year round. So a
Yeah.
minimum land lease, I think, of 3 years, Chris. And the other thing I would think is you're looking at, for 12 nobles, you're looking at about 2.4 million Canadian dollars. You're used to
Yeah.
US currency, so that's about
Right.
24 cents US.
Yeah.
But about $2.4 million for the tiny homes, and then the tent. You know it better than I do. Probably about
Yeah.
100,000 US dollars.
Yeah, the smaller one might actually be, we could probably get a little bit better deal on that. But
Yeah,
as for the large one,
I think you're right. But then you've got to fill it full of really cool stuff, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
things to
yeah,
do. So I think you're probably
security.
talking.
Yeah.
By the time you do the electrical and the plumbing and everything else you need, you're probably looking at about a $3 million investment. But the good news about that, Mark, is that most of it is movable. Obviously, not any of the electrical or
Yeah.
water and plumbing that you do, but certainly the tent, you can take it down in probably 2 or 3 days. The tiny homes are 35-foot trailers. You can haul them away. So it's pretty movable, but out of that 3 million, probably $500,000 or $600,000, something like that, probably $500,000 would stay on the site. And
Right.
basically you'd have to write that off.
Okay. Well, I love it. I will drop right into my kind of operator kind of how to like right away. But let me think about kind of, you know, what might be possible in terms of location for it.
So Mark, I'm an Ottawa guy, and so are you, and Chris knows Canada very well. I mean, he's based in Miami, he is an American, but I think you have Canadian citizenship too, right?
Yeah, and we still
So
have a
you're
place up near Montreal.
you
So
go both
what
ways,
was it?
Chris.
Yeah,
You're a dual
yeah,
citizen.
exactly.
You know, we'd like to do, the group would like to do two, one in Miami because Chris is there, and one in
Yeah.
Ottawa. And it would be, I think, you know, when you see some of the design work that's been done behind, you know, I didn't want to put 400 slides together. We'd never get through them. But when you see the full extent of what Chris and the group are working on, I think it's quite impressive. And like I said, I'm the champion here, and I love the idea, and I think it will produce good results. But I'd love to see one in Ottawa.
Yeah, very cool.
All right. And did you copy out of the chat box Chris's contact information?
I did not.
I can always email it over to you right
Oh,
after
yeah,
too.
maybe
That's-
it's right
Do
there
that
with you.
if you don't mind, Chris. You got my email.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, thank you for that. And so what I'll do, Mark, after this conversation is over, we're going to terminate it in the next 60 seconds. This video will download to my computer. I will upload it to my YouTube channel, but it will be unlisted.
Yeah.
So I'll share the link with you and Chris, obviously, but it's not to be made public. We don't want this public.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, Bruce.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, so just what does that mean, unlisted? Can
So
people
it
find
means that
if
the
they're-
only people who can see it will be people with the link. So if you want to show it to
Oh
your,
yeah, peace. Okay, yeah.
if you want
Okay.
to show it
Right.
to
I
your
don't want to be
operational,
defaming the city publicly in that, so there we go. All right.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely not. No, it's not to be shared publicly. It just that if you wanted to show it to your operational people or
Got
Chris,
it. Yeah, got
the
it.
replay is
Awesome.
there for you. Okay.
Beautiful. If I
right.
got questions, Bruce, am I phoning you or am I talking to Chris?
I think it would be best to follow up directly with Chris.
Peace.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll take care of you.
Awesome.
Bye, Mark.
Right
Stay on
on.
the line
Thank you
there, Chris.
thank you for your time, guys.
Thanks,
Bruce,
Mark.
nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
All right, I'm going to stop recording here in a second.